Yesterday, a new opinion poll out of Alberta put Alison Redford at 17%. 17%! Two high-profile MLAs quit her government in the past week, and the warmest thing most party elders could say about her was that they hope she improved. There were credible reports that up to 20 Conservative MLAs were about to bolt from the government altogether and start a rump independent caucus of their own. So at 6 p.m. local time last night, Redford called a press conference to announce she was quitting.
For the first time in 6 years, Alberta's budget is fully balanced. We are united in eliminating our infrastructure deficit with our Building Alberta plan. Quite simply, I am not prepared to allow party and caucus infighting to get in the way of building a better future for our province and for all Albertans. And that is why I am announcing today that with a profound optimism for Alberta's future, I am resigning as Premier of Alberta, effective this Sunday evening.
See, right there, I think you saw part of the problem. She started by saying Alberta's budget was balanced, but it's not. Let me take a moment here. I mean, in the budget tabled earlier this month, Redford claimed that they had a $2.6 billion surplus, but that they also borrowed an additional $5.1 billion. Now, if you say you have an extra $2.6 billion, but you also had to borrow $5.1 billion, that tells me you were $2.5 billion short. So that's what you would call a lie about money. Now, so what, right? In some provinces, balancing a budget isn't particularly important. I mean, Ontario is a have-not province now, and its citizens are being conditioned by the Liberal Party to expect failure year after year. It's being normalized. It now has a culture of low expectations. I'm not sure if Quebec has had a balanced budget in our lifetime, but they don't even care since they get such massive equalization payments from the rest of Canada. But in Alberta, a balanced budget and a government living with its means is a woven feature of the fabric of the province. It goes back almost 100 years when Alberta effectively went bankrupt during the Great Depression. That launched 40 years of frugal governments, including under Ernest Manning, the province's premier for 25 years, a scandal-free 25 years, known for his personal modesty and keeping the government modest too. In the 1980s, under the Progressive Conservatives, they forgot about fiscal responsibility and started racking up huge deficits again. So Ralph Klein came in and cut spending without raising taxes. He balanced the budget. Even when oil was just $11 a barrel, he did it. Albertans remember that. They remember that Klein cut the fat from the government's budget, not the heart out of their budgets. It's why they put up with Klein's personal shenanigans. They knew he wasn't in it for himself, even if he had some quirks. Alison Redford, though, doesn't come from that Alberta tradition of living small, living within her means. She doesn't come from an entrepreneurial background. She's a lifelong political operator. She used to work for Joe Clark, the reddest red Tory. She worked for the United Nations in Africa. She only became the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party 3 years ago by gaming the system. The leadership rules were so open to temporary Tories. She signed up thousands of government union workers who typically vote NDP and made a deal with them. If they made her leader of the Tories, she'd reward them with huge wage hikes. It was a takeover of the party by the left. The Progressive Conservatives were like an old company with a good brand name but not a lot of pep, sort of like BlackBerry, I guess. Glorious past, dwindling present. So it was a corporate takeover. Redford had only a single MLA supporting her. She was in fourth place in the first ballot, if I recall, but with a lot of union members, she won. She explicitly ran in her first election as a red Tory, not even a red Tory, an anti-Tory. She couldn't have been clearer. If you were right-wing, she didn't want your vote. And that was smart in a way. All the real right-wingers had already left for the upstart Wild Rose Party. If you look at where her vote came from, almost all of it came from the collapsing Alberta Liberal Party. The new Conservative Party of Alberta, the true Conservative Party, Danielle Smith's Wild Rose Party, got 34% of the vote. Almost all of that came from the PC's traditional vote, but the Liberal vote collapsed. In the previous election, the Liberals had a respectable 26%, but that plummeted to 10%. All of those Liberals went to vote for the real Liberal with the real chance of winning, Alison Redford. It was actually a unite the left strategy. The Liberal and red Tory votes together, united under Redford, were enough to beat the upstart Wild Rose. But here's the thing. Redford governed just like she campaigned. She played to her base, not traditional Conservatives, but to the Liberal red Tory coalition she built. She gave away billions to the unions, but worse than that, she shucked off that traditional Ernest Manning, Ralph Klein style of frugality. Manning and Klein had their critics, but no one ever said they were lining their own pockets. Under Alison Redford, month after month, details leaked out about the royal lifestyle of Princess Alison and her court. She was already the most overpaid premier in the country, but her staff made even more money than her. Her personal assistants, her chief of staff, they were making close to $1/3 a year each. Her chief of staff made double what Barack Obama's chief of staff made. Senior staff were jetting in regularly from Toronto or elsewhere, staying in ritzy hotels. It looked like a plunder. Redford herself was the worst, the famous $45,000 trip to Nelson Mandela's funeral when David Alward, the Premier of New Brunswick, did the same trip for just $950. Using private planes to zip around to vacation spots like Palm Springs, not just for her, but for her kid and her kid's friend too. And the trip to Chicago, $16,000, including more than $2,000 in hotel expenses. How do you even do that? Expensing meals that she had with her own sister? Did Ernest Manning ever do such a thing in his 25 years? Now, once is an error, twice might be carelessness, but again and again and again, and you've got a culture of entitlement, and a fish rots from the head down. Redford's example was followed throughout the government. Executives at Alberta's bloated health bureaucracy were earning scandalous sums of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars as administrators, bizarre expenses to the taxpayer, like having specialty cell phones installed in their luxury vehicles. So un-Albertan, so much more like a UN bureaucrat who never had to answer to anyone, let alone the little people. If Alberta's taxes were going down, if the budget were balanced or in surplus, this might have been excused by Albertans, but Alberta's government budget is a disaster, even with oil at $100 a barrel. And even on her way out, Redford proved how tone-deaf she was about telling the truth about money. You heard her. It was always grudging with her. We showed you the clip the other day of how she announced she was finally repaying back the $45,000 for that luxury flight from South Africa after weeks of refusing to do so and saying she had done nothing wrong. Remember this?
I've informed my caucus, my cabinet, and my party that I have personally paid for the costs associated with the recent South Africa trip. I want to sincerely apologize to Albertans for these costs, and I put in place measures to make sure that this never happens again.
Yeah, that kind of too little, too late, give it back only when forced to business, that doesn't show contrition. That shows entitlement that is not repentant, not reformed. It was the same last night when she went out, still brazening it out, still claiming she had balanced the budget, still claiming it was about other people not getting along, when everyone knows it's not true and knows she knows it's not true, and she says it anyways. Oh, there's lamenting in Toronto, though. All of her Toronto-based consultants and spin doctors. The government has more than 1,000 communication staff on the payroll in Alberta, but she still hired Toronto firms for hundreds of thousands of dollars to spin for her, just like she hired Dalton McGuinty's spin doctors to come west to help her spin to the dumb locals. You'd think someone as alien to Alberta values would have hired some local Sherpas to help her understand Alberta's fiscal responsibility. Hiring McGuinty's team, who knew little about Alberta and cared less about Alberta, only magnified her natural disconnect from the people she ruled. Toronto will be sad she's gone. The bigoted Toronto Globe and Mail actually wrote this headline: Alberta steps into the present. When she was elected, Alberta, home of the famous 5 suffragettes, home of the first female magistrate in the entire British Empire, Alberta, home of Canada's first female Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Alberta, whose opposition leader, Danielle Smith, is also a woman. This is the Alberta that needs to take lessons from Toronto's all-male Globe and Mail senior management staff about diversity? Come on. They didn't like her because she was a woman. They liked her because she was a Trojan horse, a fake conservative who sneaked into office with the help of temporary Tories from the labor unions. That's why Toronto loved her. It wouldn't surprise me if Redford actually eventually makes her way back to Toronto or back to the UN. Alberta's not really her style. The Wild Rose lost the last election because at the last moment, Albertans got nervous about them. Were they too unready? Did they have too many yahoos? Would they bring too much instability to the province? Well, funny about that, the party with the most yahoos, the most instability, with a constantly bitching, constantly distracted caucus, with the ever-changing leader, isn't the upstart. It's the dying old party that's been in power since 1971, holding on with its fingernails. The problem was Alison Redford, for sure. But it was also the dozens of MLAs and hundreds of PC party poobahs who went along with her in silence, fine with the culture of entitlement, abandoning her only when she was sinking them in the polls. But they stuck with her for 3 years, the same reason the unions did, the Toronto PR firms did. They were all getting free rides on private jets. Tories in Alberta, oh, they're going down soon enough. But until then, those backbench MLAs thought they'd ring it for all it was worth. Money, power, perks, plane rides, whatever. Redford may be gone, but every Tory who supported her for the past 3 years has their own explaining to do, too. They've been very un-Albertan, and I think they know it.